there, everybody. So sorry for the late start today. Better late than never. I'm going to be doing a portrait today. I found this reference at the studio, and I'm 99.9% sure this is a beautiful picture from the photo sharing site. Sorry. It's called Unsplashed or Unsplash, or one of the two. In any case, I love to paint in black and white acrylic, and that's what you'll see on this white palette. The paint will show up in a second once I start mixing it. But I have two kinds of white, and I want to talk a little bit about that as I go. There's titanium and blockout white. And if anybody happens to be watching this live and wants to just throw something up on the chat just so I know you can hear me, etc., that would be so appreciated if at any point you want to throw something up. So what I usually do to get started is I wash out black paint with a little water on the palette, and I stand way back and I visualize where I want to put this on the canvas and just lightly start kind of blocking a few marks just to kind of And so I look at parameters quite often. Now, she's a little, it feels like off. Oh, she's pretty centered, but there's a little bit more room to the left side, especially because her head's turned this way. And with the acrylic, I really try to keep it kind of watery and loose. You can scrub it away, and I'm using the white of the canvas initially, and once I exhaust that as like a resource, I'll just kind of switch to a more opaque paint with white in it. This is always to me like a shockingly difficult and tedious part of the process because I find it incredibly challenging to place a portrait really effectively. So we'll see. This might take a couple tries. I did a similar study kind of this reference recently, yesterday. And I did have to place it a couple of times just to sort of make sure I was off to a good start. It feels like I want to put her like more to the right, but I know that there's going to be this big mass of dark shape here. You can see I just try my best to move around, stay very light, very non-committal. I'm not like drawing a big exact line and placing the curl. It's just kind of like, this is generally darker. And so, you know, it doesn't really take all that much information to put out there on the canvas, and you'll be able to see like if the, well, best case scenario, you'll be able to see if everything is placed well and know what changes need to be made before you kind of proceed with the process. But you just do this with the most light, thin, kind of non-committal kind of thing, you know, that you can do. You don't need to be too locked in at this point. You want to stay really loose. You can always switch from painting in acrylic to painting in oil. Cannot go back the other way. So if you started painting in oil, you really can't change to acrylic unless you don't care if it like falls apart or, you know, best case scenario like is not archival. So mainly I focus on just kind of like parameters of the composition, placement of the features, this stage, and my next stage is going to be kind of like a scrub of value to like unify all of the darks and really lock into the relative shadow shapes. But this is maybe a little bit rough drawing wise still. I'd like to refine just a little bit more. And I don't mean like, you know, get all detailed and everything, but just maybe make this like a little bit more accurate slash feel a little more confident that she's going to end up in pretty much the right spot on the canvas. The side of the face is here. Like this nose and center line and mouth even have to for a little bit. Okay, that feels better. It feels a lot better since I moved that mouth over just a little. All right. Here's the collarbone. I feel like it was getting a little bit low before, and now at any point I could stop and make some measurements, but this is just a loose little kind of black and white portrait study that I believe I will finish in today's session. I just want to kind of show you this really fun portrait process, and black and white paint, and it can't be understated how fun that is. It can't be overstated how fun that is. That's what I meant. That's what I meant. All right. And then the shoulder needs to come up a little higher. I think we're all good. I just saw my camera notification kind of blip on and off. Like, we'll see. Either I'm talking to myself or I am successfully broadcasting on YouTube. So all of this is like totally subject to change. So don't feel like I'm just, you know, showing you that I start with the eyes or anything. I'm really just kind of looking very generally for like the dark shapes, which direction this angle between the eyes is going. I still don't have any value on the face, and I absolutely believe that even in the lights, I like to block in just a little wash so that you're not painting directly on a white canvas for a black and white acrylic and almost for anything else. I just feel like anytime you're working on that stark white canvas, it feels like you just can't really make a light color. Better to tone it a little darker. And so, you know, acrylic at this level of like opacity, transparency, it's a lot like watercolor. You can let it dry for a minute and it will stay on the surface and like won't get reworked. It's really fun to work with. You can do so much with that at this stage. And then you can either finish it in black and white acrylic or switch to oil or switch to black and white oil or full color or whatever you want to do. There's so many things. So as I'm seeing this develop, like so far I think so good. Whoops, that was way too dark. So far so good. Oh, hey Gary, thank you so much for the comment. That was way too dark though. We're gonna switch that up and scrub that around. Raise the top of the head up just a little bit. I feel like that part would be kind of good to start to indicate So on my palette, I have Blackout White and I have Titanium White, which is, they're both like very student grade, not amazing paints, but I actually really love their consistency. I think they're just a little bit more fluid to work with than most acrylic that I have found, and maybe I've just gotten very used to that. It's really nice as an underpainting. I feel like it stays really loose. I don't know. Kind of like that consistency of acrylic, but most are sold as like heavy body acrylic paints, and they're much more kind of like oil paint almost. Although they dry not at all like oil paint. So, all right. So I just developed these features a little here, a little there. I often find like when I work too much on one feature, it can look really nice. Maybe that feature in and of itself looks okay, but it often doesn't feel like it fits in the face. Or I have to do like a whole lot of work and cross my fingers, try to make it fit into the face. So, you know, if I can, just keep working around. It's the same thing from landscape or floral or whatever we're doing. And then I just start to, you know, think about relative values and work my way towards the actual values. But I'm certainly not trying to like match the value of what I'm seeing. I just want to kind of map out the light and shadow pattern in a relative way. So this is all dark. Now the drawing will get lost over and over again. She appears, disappears. So I often think that when people draw in a portrait and their initial line work, their placement just looks so good, I think, uh-oh. Because you're going to really struggle to hold on to that likeness. And so it's okay if we're like, you know, not quite seeing a finished feeling likeness, you know. Things have to move. There has to be a lot of like unpleasant under construction time, I feel. Oh, the titanium in the blackout is just the opacity. So the blackout, like, it's very annoying to blend with, but it really covers. And I just started noticing that I really do need both of them. This one's the titanium. I'll try to, this is really light, so it'll probably cover okay. Not that great. Here's the blackout. Because I was going to break this up a little bit. And that really, I think, I mean, I think on camera you could tell that's better. So I just sort of work back and forth between the two. But at this time, even just kind of talking for a moment, it probably set up enough, dried enough so that I can kind of take a really light color. Let's go lighter. And just almost like wash through the planes on the light side. I don't really like working on white, like I said. Even that, sometimes I'll go plane by plane, sometimes I'll just kind of scrub it through just to give it like a little bit of a value. Ooh, white gesso. I feel like white gesso does not mix. Like I've mixed color into it and I've mixed like paint into it. It really doesn't mix the same as these paints at all. It just really wants to stay gesso. I don't think it really seems to lend itself too much to paint. let's see. Yeah, is it as blockout as is okay? And also, here's a fun fact. I actually got introduced to blackout white because white gesso was not covering all of our used painting boards that we wanted to recycle here. The white gesso like was so transparent. It took so many layers to cover it. And blackout white was absolutely like it would take one layer to cover. So it's just so much more like wall primer. It's like wall primer. Actually, if you get it on your fingers or your hands as you're painting, you really can't get it off. Just exactly like that, like Kills wall primer. So it's a very different feeling paint, and it's much more opaque than white gesso. All right, let's see what we got here. I'm just gonna like briefly see if I can. Do I know how to turn off my notifications? I don't. Okay. Well, we'll see how many more I can tolerate. I'm so sorry. Usually I remember to turn that off and I do it on my phone, and I'm sure there's a way on my computer, but technology and painting, I think these are two different mindsets that I just can't possibly mix too much more. All right, so we've got big overall value shapes. I feel like the nose is still kind of non-existent. We gotta really step back and look at how things are laying in. This whole thing is shadow. She's got shadow on much of the lower lip and a little bit underneath. I made that lip a little too dark, but that's okay. We'll come back. Maybe her mouth likeness just moved a little bit. Getting really ready for using that white paint. I think that's going to be helpful because I haven't so much used it yet, but I'm going to do so pretty much. Am I ready? I'm going to do a little more wash. It's just so much more visible if the surface is darker, and I feel like, you know, for watching on a screen, like it'd be nicer if this were a little darker. So you can really just scrub across things too. Whoops, not that hard, but I just want to darken in a bit on this light side so that white paint kind of makes sense. And then we'll do a little background. That is not going to be that dark in a minute. Or if it is, it'll be more places. So it doesn't look like I just moved her eyeball up. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm trying to just go back and like just restate those shadow shapes and just kind of get those a little bit back in. Let's see. Did this camera move? I'm going to scooch this up because I feel like it fell just a little bit. There we go. All right. And this is all hair, and this is all forehead. This is angle here. I look for that little angle of the hair here. That relationship coming down this way. There's this little kind of back and forth of the contour of the cheek that goes near the eye. The bottom of the nose, I'm going to need a totally different brush for. I feel like the mouth is like slipping down just a little, so let me emphasize that upper lip. Isn't it funny how things morph, especially early on? When you're moving around very quickly, I think that happens, you know, a little bit more. But I don't know. Maybe that's just how I feel right now because things are moving around. All right. Find the right brush. Maybe that one. Or maybe this one. Ah, yeah, I like that one. Okay, so that's like a little synthetic number, flat, and it's pretty small. But I do want to start chiseling away here and defining some more planes. Mixed a little blockout white and some black. All right. Now I'm just trying to lay in a little bit of more opaque paint, almost like that mid-tone. I don't want to push that shadow that much darker for now. It does need to go darker, but I kind of like to go there gradually. And if you can see that paint quality, it's getting a little white in it, but it's really not like a heavy, heavy paint application yet. I like to build that up as I go. I'm just kind of like restating these planes in a little bit of a more opaque version of the paint color. Slightly darker version. Darker. And sometimes I'll end up like putting down a mark that is really dark just to have paint down to paint into, or that I want to flick the paint away from that mark with some water or another color or something like that. So I don't know, sometimes that's part of the plan. So I'm starting to like kind of just get that value pattern going. Let's see, we have about 30 minutes left. Can I finish this portrait in 30 minutes? I think I can. Ask me in 5 minutes and I might say something different. But let's try it. All right, so we have the darker shadow. We're gonna come through here a little bit. Again, still kind of thinking about working through the features. Her hair would be a nice addition to like get that similarity. Very thin paint still. It's almost like Polaroid-like, you know? It is very Polaroid-like. the direction of the brush strokes, might as well try to use them. Kind of use those to describe the planes that you're seeing. Sometimes they might kind of wrap around and describe the form that way. I think something really nice happens when you're working like this and you start to get enough kind of wet paint on the surface. Anyways, I haven't used a lot of the transparent white yet. I've been feeling like this is a really, like, it feels very like the surface is pretty wet with both water and paint, and that transparent white just doesn't feel like it's doing the job. But let's try it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I have a preference right now, but I sure do know that sometimes it will make a difference. All right, I see like I have a little more Inglesy in here. I definitely want to start getting opaque paint on the side of the face here. We need to get a little darker on the fold next to the nose. And I just kind of wipe out my brush and then use the maybe the paint that's already on the canvas. There we go. Let's get paint on her neck. You can see this part still just like white canvas. It looks pretty, everything just looks so dark on a white canvas. So really I just want to fill this in a little bit, start building up a little paint surface. You know, not just with any random color or anything. I'm definitely thinking about the planes and the areas that you see some variation in value. Working through, working around. I just saw something I could do, and so I did it. It's like a very quick study painting. I have to keep telling myself that because it is so easy to get really zoned in, especially because I'm doing it on camera and I'm like, oh, I really want to make sure that it turns out well, so let me take my time. But no, we're not taking our time today. Just gonna burn through it. So see what happens. All right, there's some dark hair that defines the neck. I didn't go right to the edge because I'm not ready to like commit to the edge yet. I really want to define the angle a little bit more. She's got this earlobe. Let's see if we can figure out a way to develop that eye just a little bit without getting like bogged down. The eye's part of it. I always hate to see when either people want to start with the eye or they want to leave the eye till the very last. And that to me is like the scariest thing to possibly do to a portrait. Because it is so hard to get the eye to like look like it fits in the face unless it's really been treated just like any other part of the face. You know, we need to just kind of think of it as its own simple part of the face. It's really just an indentation first and foremost, and there's lots going on within that eye socket or indentation, but really it's just got to set up the neighborhood first, you know, like you have to build that structure and then we'll kind of see if we can get it to fit within that structure. Like when I can take a mark, for example, in that underpainting and just kind of follow right along with it or emphasize it just to kind of oops. Hilarious. That's correct. All right. And like coming back into this nose, we're just kind of looking at the shadow shape. I just keep missing. This is very, I mean, it does happen from time to time, but honestly, like I'm kind of separated from the canvas a little bit more than I usually would be because I have this big camera hanging down, and I'm going to blame the camera. I'm for sure blaming the camera. So there's that. All right, but yeah, no, I keep missing like my mark, and it's just, I really do feel like I just am in the ever so slightly a different place, like away from the painting because of this camera. It's throwing me off. It's throwing me off. I'm going to take just a little block out white to indicate some kind of the white of her eye over there. It gives a little more of that angle. I need some paint in this. And teaching the morning class today, I was thinking about how much more interesting and also like fun to work on paintings with brush strokes are. I just feel like there are, especially with like acrylic, there are so many limitations to this material, especially for painting very smooth, flat things. So far, I feel like okay with the placement and proportion. We'll see. I might have to do a little checking before I kind of finalize a few things, but I think the ear needs to be a little bit more defined. This is pretty... A little more there, too wide. Okay. And there is a shadow here, so we're going to paint that in. into the ear. And sometimes I'll just mix like a little of that transparent white in just because the consistency of it feels a lot better than the blackout white. So I don't know, mixing them together feels like you get a little bit of like the best of both worlds. And I really love acrylic because it does set up and dry so quickly that you can kind of make these pretty bold moves. And like right now I'm just kind of painting into the planes of the forehead a little bit, and that's fairly strong, but maybe we'll be able to tone it down. All right, I got about 25 minutes left maybe, and I think we're gonna be okay. I know it might not look like it now, but I mean, for a study. Defining that white of the eye just ever so slightly more. Above that, I feel like we could do a little bit work towards the eyebrow. A little lighter there. Not quite the right shape, but it's getting there. All right, I'm gonna put a little more light like in the cheekbone. So I'll just kind of paint through this and we'll see. All right, so what I need is a touch more room between the eyes and the eyebrow. And we have our lighter area on the nose. And it kind of fades into that shadow shape. So the general like rule of thumb about blocking stuff in, about keeping like simplified areas for light and shadow, I feel like I still try and follow that, even though I am jumping around quite a bit. Oops, sorry if I just hit the camera. Like painting right through that eyebrow I've already painted, but it's okay. We're gonna get it right back. And eyebrows are often a little lighter than we think, so a little less contrast into that wet paint could be good. I want to continue to work on the structure here and the shadow on the nose, You see there's like quite a lot of reflected light on the wing of the nose. There's shadow in the eye socket. We see a darker area on the top eyelid. And from here, we are missing a little bit of a filled in color. Let's see if I can get a correct color. Okay. All right, here we go. Moving on. We will come back to it. Let's get into the nose a little bit and try to get ever so slightly more specific. All right, as soon as I fix this horribly bright reflected light, I do have to just make sure that I don't lose power on my computer. So please bear with me for 1 second. In a moment. Just get a little tiny bit more of this nose in, and then I promise I'll go make sure I don't lose power. There we go. I just wanted to like get one tiny bit more refined. This is definitely the area that painters do not excel in, is like walking away from their painting when they they have to plug it in. All right, I'll be right back. Right back. Sorry about that. All right. It's a small space. Thanks for your patience. Here we go. All right. I think we're all still in view. Take my reference and let's just adjust a little bit. I think that's okay. Another nice way to work with acrylic is to kind of blend into the wet paint. So all of that gray that I just laid down is still wet. And we can just, you leave marks, whatever you want, but you can still work into a wet surface. And it's just such a nice way to like get some variation as you work into that paint, and it becomes like, you just get like softer edges on your marks. Maybe if you're not blending it, you can kind of work with that. So it's definitely not an all or nothing situation with blending. because we want some softer marks sometimes. All right, so now I'm kind of focusing on like getting the big picture. I don't even really think we'd see anything over there, shirt. Get a little more paint on the surface. And we'll throw in a background. Here I want the background to be a little darker than the shoulder. At least where we start. And as it moves away, we can have it change it up a little bit, turn a little lighter. And I make those kind of decisions just based on like how much contrast I want to have along the edge that I'm thinking of. So for me, like getting that shoulder to pop out against a tiny bit of a value shift darker. And as we're working here, I'm gonna make well actually I will switch brushes. Wow. The day has finally come. I'm gonna go for the ear placement. And back to the background. And I'm being somewhat careful. Not terribly careful by the edge, but somewhat careful. At least not to put down a whole ton of paint. I don't really mind if I scumble through into the side of the face. That's totally fine. Wouldn't even be a bad thing, but I just don't want to like blob out and just destroy all of my contour or edge that I had. This background's pretty rough. I'm going to grab a bigger brush. Okay. I am throwing a lot of paint on there because I really don't want to come back to it likely. This is kind of the end of my I'm coming back to it time. All right. Okay, so I think, one of the biggest changes that I can make is starting to get a darker value in the hair. That could be very good in terms of likeness and furthering this portrait. And also we need to start getting in like the hair that is in front of the background. That really can't be done before you have some background on, but it is that time. And for that, I'm going to use like a very light version, and then we'll come back and darken. So there's just directional qualities to the parts of the curl that's hanging. And the shape comes out. Sorry, I just bumped the camera again, I am sure. Sorry about that. And hair is always better if you have some softness, even if it's like slick back in a ponytail. Soft edges, very necessary. Here we have the opportunity now to define that earlobe a little bit more. It's definitely perhaps on the like short side, but that's okay. She's got all sorts of like soft edged, very fuzzy background kind of hair stuff happening. And there's this section of hair coming from the front. Really thinking about like what you're painting, and even just the direction of like, okay, the hair is, you know, coming from here and going to here, can inform your brush strokes, can help you kind of make sense of all of this information. Sorry if I'm like holding the thing up in front of the camera. But you know what? Hair is very overwhelming for painters, myself included, especially when you're starting out and there is just so much information, so much happening. I think that if we can simplify it into very basic forms, masses, and just think about it in terms of, you know, it's light and shadow, it's edge, forget it's hair. I mean, not that I'm like a, you know, known for my hair painting, but I do think that that's the key to it, is that it overwhelms with all of the information that we're seeing. So all right, now I feel like I want to get a smaller brush and the paper towel. And let's throw a few details in this little study. Get those eyelids kind of a little lighter than the shadow shape that they're in. There's maybe a little more reflected light here. That can be a very nice point for expression. Darker darks and lighter lights are usually the sign that you're reaching the end of your painting. Putting on that full range of values, I think, is what kind of makes things like a study feel complete. Again, this painting, you know, you could keep working on something like this for sure. This is a base for oil, a finished acrylic. I think I'll just spend, we have about 5 or 10 minutes or so. Really 5, but you guys know I can go 5 minutes extra, right? That's obvious. I mean, nobody's gonna call it exactly on time. All right. But I will stop soon. It's so tempting to like, oh no, I'll keep going. I'll make it better. I really want to make sure I focus on like the big issues, the big items. So now, and I haven't walked away from this at all, which of course we all know is just the worst thing you can do. It is so helpful. I was painting, like I said, I painted this reference like in class. And because it was class, I was continually walking away, constantly walking away. And every time I came back, I was like, oh, I don't have it. I thought I had it. I don't have it. You know, and I make little adjustments. And I think that likeness is probably better just for having had that experience of like, okay, walking away and reassessing. I don't want to get, you know, too kind of bogged down in what you're doing that you can't see it anymore. And while this may very well achieve, you know, okay, portrait study, I just know there's so much stuff I could do with this. I just think it's fun. I like this reference a lot. I would love to, maybe I'll try to get an oil at some point. A bigger brush because we don't have the time. Every time I go back into an area, I can just really sense how much more refining it needs, but we got to keep looking at the whole. So, you know, just so you guys are aware, I do definitely see this is not very refined, but we're going for a study and a quick painting. I think I need to get into something a little longer for the next one, maybe. And I was thinking florals to celebrate the fact that it is no longer, well, it's kind of no longer plein air painting season. So maybe I'll do a floral. Thoughts? I just wonder how long of a project we'd all like to see for something such as this, like a YouTube painting. Like 2-3 weeks, or like 5 weeks, or, you know. If you have a preference, let me know. All right, I just want to do a little touch on the eyes and then I'm done. Then I'm done. Let's see how we do. Man, does she look not quite like herself. That's all right though. I'm using that big blob of white that I accidentally painted on the mouth. I'm just going to do like a little reflected. That's funny, Gary. That's out. Looks like a cross between the photo and me is like totally the, yeah, that's absolutely, that rings true. And that's so funny because I think people do that a lot. I had my anatomy teacher who always used to make these drawings on the board, and he'd always be like, it always turns out looking like my maternal grandmother. It's kind of funny. It's just whatever is in there, interpretation, whatever it's filtering through, it really does come out, doesn't it? It's funny. All right, what's the worst thing I can fix? What's the thing that's the worst right now? Do you know, I'm drawing a blank on what's the worst. Maybe this earlobe is the worst. Probably not. All right. A few little marks of hairs, and that is what we're going to end with. Just a few little wispy hair marks, and that's good. Full range of value. We're really getting into the pure black paint, and it really does have an effect. Like once you've kind of established all of these forms with like not quite going to that darkest dark, wow. That's a satisfying way to paint, is when you can kind of put down a little bit of, sorry, it's just about to ruin my painting. Put down a dark someplace and it kind of just like sits right in the value range, just the way it needs to sit. That's fun. I was looking at this whole area and I'm like, well, you know what? We're going to leave that. This is a study that I'm walking away from. All right, now you guys heard me say the only thing I want to do is blah, 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 like 3 other times. So I just want to say thank you for attending today, and I will see you next time. So it's done. There, I've said it. It's done. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.